Hello, my friends. I'm Nick Lowry, host of the Comeback Journey podcast. For my entire life, I was trapped in a cycle of unhealthy relationships. Family, friends, lovers, all of it. Couple that with almost a decade of active drug and alcohol addiction, and that makes for quite a toxic combination. A few years ago, I decided to look inward, and what I found was that by healing, growing, and improving the relationship I have with myself, I was able to improve every other relationship in my life. It all started with me. My mission with this podcast is to empower you to cultivate healthy relationships, both with yourself and others, so you can experience a more meaningful and satisfying life. All right, my friends, Nate, Taylor, how are you?
Good.
Hi,
how are you?
great, how are you?
Doing well.
We're just enjoying hopefully the end leg of the whole pandemic.
Yeah, hopefully, right?
Yeah, but we'll
It's
see.
been a
I
little
mean,
crazy.
we've thought several times that we were on the end leg, and another leg popped up.
Yeah, especially in Arizona.
So yeah, it's been definitely quite the year.
Yeah, it has been. It's interesting because it seems like Arizona is like such a hot spot.
Not anymore.
Yeah,
Not
we're going
anymore?
down, apparently, according to her.
Yeah, we've actually had, I think, one of the fastest declines in the country. And when I checked yesterday, we only had 118 new cases. So they had us in the first half, but I think we're killing it now.
Yeah, I guess we're on like a big recovery.
Solid. That's
So-
good.
Yeah.
Maybe you can like go out and enjoy the outdoors. So
Yeah,
you guys
well,
do that
actually,
anyways, though.
they closed down a lot of like outdoor stuff for a while, and now it's most of it. I think the majority of it is reopened, but we've actually had like some pretty nasty fires that haven't been or that have been kind of close by. So there's like a whole national park area that's like closed off and stuff.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
So,
And there's fires out here too. You
yeah,
were just
I know.
like in the
I was
thick of it, right?
I was in northern. Actually, I drove from here to pretty much all through California last week, and it was smoke the entire way. It was pretty sad.
Yeah, my mom has a friend that lives in San Francisco, and
Yeah,
she
it
was
was
like,
bad.
it's just like raining ash.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I feel bad for the animals.
yeah, and all the
Yeah.
people,
yeah,
brutal.
it is. It's really unfortunate. All right, so let's segue into this a little bit.
Let's do it.
So I'd love to hear about how each of your upbringings led you to how you engaged in past relationships and what you learned along the way.
Yeah, so, well, I think for me, one of the things that kind of stood out to me just looking back from like my parents and like my family dynamic is like showing affection. So my dad was never really like an affectionate person. And so there was no like really affection in a marriage and a relationship that was ever mirrored to me, right? So I never really picked any of that up. And so I feel like that's one thing for sure that I've grown a lot in just throughout my life in the relationships is like becoming a more affectionate person, which I know is really important to her. And I know that like the beginning of our relationship, I just wasn't like the most affectionate person.
Yeah, he was a great boyfriend. He
Wasn't
just
bad.
definitely wasn't as affectionate as he has been the last few years. And I feel like he matches, as of the last, I don't know, like 3 or so years, like he's really, really matched my energy in that sense. And kind of going off of like what he said with his parents or his dad, I grew up with two parents that were always really affectionate, like in the car holding hands or like my dad's hand on my mom's lap. And just at home watching them kiss and hug and all of that stuff. So I kind of naturally picked up on that and kind of always mirrored that in relationships. And that's kind of always been my energy.
And then I wasn't showing up on that end because it never got mirrored to me. And that's what she wanted.
But I never really communicated that with him.
Yeah.
At least for a while, because like I said, he was always a really good boyfriend and I knew he loved me, and that was just how he was. And I didn't want to change him or be like, hey, like, I didn't want him to be unnaturally like affectionate towards me. So I never really said anything. And then he kind of just
Yeah, well,
became
yeah, I don't know. I guess because I knew I started to like learn that like she really liked like I said, that wasn't really like my thing for the longest time, just because of like how I grew up and stuff. And then so I just kind of slowly, like, I guess, got more comfortable and like started just being more okay with like me being more affectionate. And then it just, I don't know, it just got like better and better.
Yeah, and for context for everyone, we've been together for almost 8 years. So we've been together since we were 19. We met in college, and now we are 27. So
married for just over a year.
Yeah. We were engaged for like 2 years. So I think we got engaged at the 4-year mark, and then wait, that math doesn't add up. I don't know. We've been married for 1 year.
Yeah. Something like that. And then I think another thing too is just like communication, right? So like I was never taught like specifically like how to be good at communication, how to like communicate good with other people. And so that too is like something, and I'm sure we'll get into later.
Yeah, I wasn't taught that either.
Yeah, like so we really had to like grow together, which fortunately, you know, over the last like 2 or so years is like when we really started like being more conscious with ourselves and with each other and within our relationship. And that's where just a lot of things have changed for the better. A lot of like ways that we've kind of left old patterns of ourselves behind in terms of like communication and affection and things like that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
Especially if you start dating when you're so young, like you're 19, 20, 21, 22, you know, you can have a great boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, but it's really not on the level of like what we have now. And it's really interesting to see just the progression that we've had and
what we thought was good.
And what we thought was good back then. And it's so funny because I look back and I'm like, oh my God, we were so juvenile back then. Like we were so young, and I don't know. It's really cool to see the progression in our relationship.
Yeah, this is incredible stuff. This is something that I try to highlight with the clients that I work with, is like how important effective communication is.
Yeah.
And we are going to get into that a bit later, but I just wanted to note like how you said when you started to put, like you direct your attention to that and be more intentional in your communication and how you're able to interact with each other, that's when things started to change. I think that's a really important point to note.
Yeah, and I think like, I guess kind of the turning point was like a lot of people, when you go through like a journey of like personal growth and like personal development, all that stuff, you kind of reach that point where you realize like, damn, all of my experiences, like my family dynamic, everything I've experienced up to this point is like the reason why I am the way that I am. And you get to that point where you're just like, damn, from this point forward, like I can leave all of that behind and I can completely recreate myself, and I can recreate, you know, the type of person that I am. And also, you know, for the sake of this conversation, like the type of person that I'm going to show up as in a relationship. And so that kind of opens up like a clean slate to just, you know, be the type of person that you want to be, and also be the type of person that you want to be for your partner as well.
Right. Yeah. That's super important to understand that like you are, like everyone has the ability to change no matter what point they're at in their life. Like there's always room to improve and unlearn old patterns, relearn more effective and healthy ways to go about life in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no such thing as I just am, or I am.
Just the way I am.
It's just the way that I am.
Yeah, exactly.
People love that. But once you realize, like, once you can basically like step outside of yourself and look at yourself from like a perspective as like just literally like stepping outside of yourself and like realizing that, you know, this is the current version of myself, but I can recreate this new version of myself if I want to. Whereas most people are kind of stuck in that version and they're just like, oh, well, this is just how it is. This is just who I am. I've always been like this.
Oh God.
Yeah. Love that.
We've all heard it. All right. So in your current situation, your current relationship, why is it so important to be able to clearly express your own needs, and how did you learn to express those needs?
Well, okay. Actually, one thing that we kind of talked about briefly before starting this is like, I feel like in a lot of relationships, it's so easy to lose yourself in that relationship. So for us, like we're coaches, right? And we have a lot of clients who like one of their main goals is like fitness related, right? And it's mainly females, and they mostly want to lose weight. And so one thing that we see really commonly is, you know, let's say someone has a boyfriend or a husband, and the girl really wants to weight, right? She wants to change her lifestyle, change her diet, and her husband or her boyfriend isn't really into that life, right? He just kind of eats whatever, doesn't really have any sense of like good nutrition. So what we kind of both see a lot is their partner will influence their decision and be like, oh, like, what do you mean? Like, you don't need to eat that. Like, let's go out to dinner, right? And so what kind of happens is people like merge with their partner, right? They take on their partner's beliefs. They literally lose their identity. They lose touch with the things that are really important to them. And that's a huge way that people just like don't clearly express their needs because they've literally merged with that other person. They're basically living in a shadow of themselves where they're denying their reality and like tuning into their partner's reality, and they think that that's the right thing to do. They think they're like being nice, right? They're just, oh, like, I want to go out with my boyfriend, I want to go out with my husband, when in reality they're denying their needs, right? They're denying their need to change their lifestyle, to reach their goals, to live a healthy lifestyle, things like that.
And a lot of that too comes with people just getting too comfortable in relationships, and anything outside of their comfort zone is scary in a sense. And they just kind of like, sticking to a nutrition plan and working out and all of that, like it can be really scary for a lot of people because it's a really big commitment. And a lot of people rather just stay comfortable in their relationship and, do whatever their significant other wants to do. And yeah, I think it comes down to being comfortable too.
Yeah. And I think like just with that, it's so important to ask yourself, like, are my beliefs and my habits, are these like truly my own, or am I like just completely picking up what my significant other is thinking, what his or her thoughts and beliefs are? And when you're operating on their energetic level and you have no like energetic sovereignty, you have no like connection with who you truly are, it's going to be nearly impossible for you to communicate what your needs are, because you don't even know what your needs are. You're just living based off your partner's needs, right? And think that, by you satisfying what they want and satisfying their beliefs, right, you're doing the nice thing, you're being a nice person in the relationship. When in reality, you're just completely denying, who you truly are.
Yeah, this is something that I've seen a lot, and I'm sure, as you just explained, you see it pretty regularly. And it's hard to, like, when you're in the thick of it, like in that specific situation, like as you mentioned before, being able to like take a step outside of yourself and observe like where you're at, and being able to identify like, are these my own needs, or is this just something I adopted from the person that I'm with? Like, is this really what I want? Is this really what I need? And this is, I think this ties a lot into boundaries, both with other people and with yourself. Like, especially in a program like the one that you two have, in that situation where one partner wants to make these changes and the other person doesn't, it's important for the person that wants to make the changes to stick to it and like tell themselves like, okay, like I'm going to do this regardless of what the other person is doing, because I'm still my own person.
Yeah. And then what was the second part of the question? What was it?
The second part of the question was, how did you learn to express these needs? Like,
I
think I have an answer.
What is your answer?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to
I just express my needs.
Yeah.
that's how I operate. I just express what I need.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it comes down to like reaching a level of safety in the relationship. Because kind of going back to that example of just like with nutrition, right? If you feel as though like your significant other isn't going to support you, right, then you're not going to feel safe communicating what your needs are, right? So a lot of it, and I think for us too, it was like just really kind of reaching that level in our relationship where we both know and we both feel safe that like me communicating my needs to her or vice versa, like we're gonna understand the other person, even if it kind of is in conflict with what I'm feeling or what she's feeling.
That's a really good point. I like that answer. It's not the easiest thing to do, like Taylor, you said, like you just express your needs. That's just how you've always done it. I'm the opposite. I had to like learn how to do that just from like a people-pleasing background. Like I put my needs secondary to other people's. And so figuring out how to navigate that world and like not feel guilty for saying no, or saying like, I'm going to do this whether or not whoever else is involved disagrees.
Right.
And it's something that I think more people need to be aware of. This is like, because if you're in a relationship, as you said, and you're not safe, like you don't feel safe expressing your needs or doing what you want to do, even though the other person doesn't want to do it, most likely you're not going to do these things that you feel you need to do.
It's going to be really hard.
Yeah. Well, another thing too is like, I also feel like in a lot of relationships, people go so long without expressing their needs and without having their needs met that they almost get to this point where they've hit a point where it feels awkward to now express their needs, because they're probably living in fear, thinking like, well, if I waited months to tell him this, like he's gonna be like, why are you just now telling me this? Like, why didn't you tell me this a year ago?
Yeah.
Like it seems kind of weird. And I feel like we talked about this recently with just relationship people that we know. I feel like that's a really common thing. Like you go so long of not expressing your needs, not having your needs met, that you almost like convince yourself that like at this point it just doesn't even matter, and you just you settle for not having your needs met.
Well, and then it just builds up his resentment.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So like the longer, I feel like the longer you go, the longer and deeper you get into that hole of like your significant other being like, what do you mean? Like, why didn't you tell me that 5 years ago? It's a
recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it just feels like awkward, I guess. And so I think for us, like we just kind of reached a point where we kind of got over that hump of like, we just feel okay, like, and feel honored and feel safe, like expressing like, hey, this is how this is making me feel. And we just know that we're going to, be able to like talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. This whole topic is super important.
Yeah.
I had a client recently that was in that exact situation where her significant other was like not doing the dishes or not taking the trash out. And it's little things like that. And she never said anything ever. She just like would deal with it and in her head be like super frustrated and like start building resentment, but just write it off as like, oh, okay, whatever, I'll just deal with it. And then, getting her to the point where she could express these needs and like what was bothering her to her partner. And like, turns out it's not as bad as she thought it would be, like the reaction.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. And I feel like that's such an essential part of every relationship. Like if you're constantly expressing your needs and your partner is just like shutting you down, like that's not really like a great relationship.
Yeah.
Your partner should be like, even, and like kind of like you said, even if the other person doesn't understand, like they should still be able to understand like your experience and still be like, hey, you know what? Like, I hear you. I'm gonna do this for you, or I'm gonna be better in this way. Versus like, really, like, what are you talking about? Like, just
that's the ego just getting in the way.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't do egos in this household.
Yeah. But and two, I feel like what we've just been talking about these past few minutes is like a universal concept for like any relationship, right? So if you have, a relationship where the energy dynamic is like so imbalanced, like let's say you have a boss, right, who's constantly just like belittling you and blah, 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 and just, doing whatever, like you got to express your needs. And I feel like we've had 2 or 3 clients like over the last few weeks who have expressed to their bosses or to their work like how they're feeling about certain things, and it ended up being a huge relief to them. And they're just like,
they felt so empowered.
Yeah.
Like, wow, why didn't I do this sooner?
Yeah, and it's like, it's so liberating to like, you build up that energy for so long, and you have like that really dense, like that heaviness in your body, and just from shutting yourself down and not expressing your needs, and then you finally do, and it's just like, oh my God, you just feel like so liberated. And I think also too, like that was kind of a thing for us, is like once you get in that process of like expressing your needs, it feels so much easier, it feels so much more comfortable, and it happens so much more effortlessly. It turns into like something that maybe would have been a big conversation in the past is now just like everyday conversation, just like, hey, yeah, that's kind of making me, feel a certain way, like let's talk about that.
Right. Yeah. So. It's crazy that you mentioned that about the workplace, because I've also encountered this with clients like within the last month, where their workload is like everyone's dumping their additional work onto this one person, and they're just totally overwhelmed. They don't want to say anything because they don't want to jeopardize their position, or, you know, not saying like getting called into work on a day off and like not wanting to say like, no, I can't make it. They just automatically do it, even though they have other things to do. But you're right. Like when you finally do that, you get that release, and it's an incredible feeling.
Yeah.
And then to be consistent with it after that, like you don't want to just do it once and then like hope that everything is going to be all hunky-dory the rest of the time. Like you have to keep up with it.
Yeah. Well, and actually, just a side note to that, I don't know where I saw this, but I'm pretty sure it was from a credible source. I saw somewhere that like, if you like communicate your needs to your boss, for example, that's actually a good sign, because that shows your boss that like you're someone who is like self-confident and you're like self-empowered, which is like a really good characteristic for an employee. So a lot of people are living in fear of like, oh, I can't let my boss know how I'm feeling. But in reality, there's actually, I don't know if it's research or where I saw that, but it's actually like a good thing in your boss's eyes if you like stand up for yourself and like communicate your needs, because it's a sign of like self-confidence.
It makes sense. If I was a boss, I would like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It even ties into like negotiating an offer for a job. Like if you just accept what they give you, they're going to be like, oh, okay, like we can pretty much have them do whatever we want. But if you stand up for yourself and you're like, actually, like, you know, this, and this, these are my qualifications, I believe that I'm worth more, they're going to be like, oh, okay, like this person's on it. Like they believe in themselves.
Right. For sure.
So yeah, it is. So I think this is a good segue. We were just talking about expressing needs. With you two, obviously communication is very important. Was that something you had to work on? Like, do you have similar communication styles, or did you have to kind of work together to find some kind of balance with that?
Definitely had to work on that.
Yeah. We've never had bad communication.
Right.
But it's definitely gotten really, really good over the last few years. I think in the beginning, well, did you want to about?
Oh, well, so when we're like in an argument, that's where our communication styles really clash, because she tends to be like more like feeling like the emotions of like what we're talking about, and I tend to be like more like objective and like just, I don't know, I guess like really think things out, whereas she like really feels the emotions. And so one way that we've kind of clashed in our relationship, and one way that we've really grown, is like when we're in an argument, she will get to a point where like she puts her walls up and like she needs her space, right?
So what I like to do is if we're starting to get into an argument, I will just leave the room, because I just don't want to deal with it right then. I don't want the conversation to escalate. I don't like fighting. I don't like arguing. I would rather just leave and then we'll come back to it. But he wants to talk about it like right then and there. And so
yeah, we really clashed over that.
Yeah, but it's really interesting because, like I said, things have really, our communication style ever since we've just really dove into personal development has gotten better and better. And, you know, I don't think we've had an argument in 6, 7, 8 months.
Yeah, it's
been a really long time. But prior to that is, you know, when I would do the walking away and he would want to come after me, and I'm just like, no.
Yeah, so that's one way that like our communication styles really clash. And like I in particular have really had to grow, because like she said, like we'll get to a point where like she just needs her space. Like she's just like overwhelmed by what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's my way of de-escalating the situation.
Yeah, she needs like her time to like let things process, let things cool off. But me, I don't like when there's unresolved conflict. So she would do that, and I would like keep trying to talk about it with her to try and finish it. And she would get like more upset, and I would also get more upset, because like I want it to just be over with, but she needs like her space. So it would just get worse and worse. And so the way that I've really had to grow is to like really recognize that that's just the way that our communication styles really differ. And, you know, when I would keep trying to talk about it, like I would just be pushing her over the edge more and more. So I was like, I had just had this self-realization that I was like, okay, I need to give her space. I need to respect that, because like when I don't, she gets more upset, I get more upset, and it just doesn't work. And so what I decided that would be the best is like when she is like, all right, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm just like, just stop.
And that's partly because as we started to learn about boundaries, just with personal development and stuff, we had never like really talked about our boundaries or anything like that. I think a lot of them are just like unspoken that we know about. But I had walked away and I was like, don't follow me. I'm putting up a boundary. And he stopped in his tracks and he walked away. And that was really cool because I think he knew like, hey, like I'm serious. I'm putting up a boundary and I need you to respect it. And yeah.
And so that was kind of the turning point where I was like, in my head, I was like, okay, like this is something that I know that I need to work on. So this is my commitment to not only myself, but also to her that like, if, you know, next time we're in an argument, like when we get to that point where it's not going anywhere and like she needs her space, like I'm done. Be like, all right, we'll talk later. See you later.
Yeah. And
it's gone really well.
Yeah. I think you've really come to realize that is like truly my communication style was just to leave. And it's not me just, you know, being a punk and like leaving the room, but that's truly how I am able to just kind of like I just want to de-escalate the situation. And like, usually when I walk away, I just walk to like go lay down on the couch or the bed and I just like sit in silence. And that's my way of just, you know, breathing.
Letting it unravel a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I think that alone has really like transformed our relationship a lot because I don't know. I mean, I feel like, you know, how you argue and like how you communicate in those like more heightened situations, you know, can be like huge breaking points for relationships because it just, when two people are clashing like that, it usually never ends well. Right. It just gets worse and worse. And then like, it'll build up over weeks and months and like all these little things. And like, I feel like it's easy to just become more and more irritated with each other when, you know, things just aren't getting resolved. So the way that we kind of do things now is like, now by her getting her space and both of us getting our space, like we can calm down and we can actually, you know, finish the discussion of the conversation or whatever it is, like in a calm, more productive way. And then we usually end up being like, okay, yeah, you're right. Or like, yeah, I guess I was wrong or whatever it is. And there's actually a resolution, you know, rather than just like it escalating. And then it's just like, screw you, like F off. But I mean, we don't say that.
Yeah, we don't do that.
But I mean, like getting to that escalation point where it's just like the two people are just done. And then when they come together, it's not really resolved. They just cool off and they forget about it.
Right. Yeah, that's a really important point to make. I go over this with my clients is like understanding what you're feeling in the moment. Like I have them like track their feelings and write it down in the circumstances and try to figure out the why behind it. And it ties into communication because for me personally, I have a similar communication style to Taylor where like I'm like in the moment, it's hard for me to express like what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. And so sometimes I need to just walk away and revisit it at a later time. But it's also important to be able to understand what you're feeling. Like, even if you don't know exactly why, or like you need time to process, I think it's important to recognize what emotions are coming up. And then you can identify these triggers and like, then you get a situation that you two have where you're able to understand each other's point of view and work together and coexist, I guess is the word, like coexist in a way where you can balance and figure out and come to a solution rather than, as you said, Nate, you know, being mad, storming off, and then coming back together and just forgetting about it, but never really resolving the issue.
Right. Yeah. And I think a really important thing with that, kind of what you mentioned, is like once you kind of, I guess, unpack your emotions and really understand, like, and I guess being able to communicate, like, this is why I'm feeling this way, versus like usually in like kind of a heat of an argument or disagreement, it's hard to express like why I'm feeling a certain way. Why did I react to, you know, whatever happened in that specific way? So I think that's super important. And I think that just comes from like doing that inner work on yourself and understanding, like, you know, why am I feeling the way that I am? Is there like an unmet need and something triggered that? And that's why, you know, this led to this like emotional cascade or just led to, you know, whatever it is. That's the reason why I'm feeling it. And like when you can express that within a relationship, I feel like that it kind of offers an explanation as to like why, you know, each person reacted the way that they did, which is really, I think, super important point.
And I think too, a lot of people, I mean, everyone has an ego, obviously, but I think in relationships, the ego sometimes starts to really take over. And I think that that's a lot of fights really start to escalate from that, or arguments start to escalate from that. And I personally don't give a crap about being right. I'll admit when I'm wrong. I don't care to win the conversation. Like, I just don't want to argue. Like, I love this human more than anything. And, and I think that a lot of people's arguments really escalate from one person like needing to be right or needing to prove a point.
Yeah. I think you both just hit those points perfectly. Yes. What you two just said, it made so much sense. And I think that anybody that listens to this, when they hear that, they're going to be like, oh, now, like, hopefully, like, grant them more awareness around this, so that where they can start to dig into it more and understand themselves on a deeper level and do the inner work, as you said.
Yeah. And this kind of just popped into my head, but it's kind of funny because I recall a time when we were in the car, and I've done it a bunch since, but we would maybe disagree on something. It's not an argument, but it's a disagreement, and we're like going back and forth on, you know, what's right or what's wrong. And I mean, you can tell that, because like Nathan said, I tend to be more emotional, so I get maybe a little bit more frustrated, and I don't want to deal with it. Like, I don't want to argue or anything. And usually that whatever it is that we're disagreeing about is really, at the end of the day, not that important. And so I'll just say, okay, we'll just talk about it later. And I started saying that a few times, and then like now when I say it, he just laughs. Like the last couple of times, I'll just be like, we'll be like going back and forth. I'm like, we'll just talk about it later. And then he just laughs. And then I don't even know if we ever talk about it, because it's really not that big of a deal, whatever it is that we're talking about, or maybe we do if it is, but that's kind of like my way of just being like, just dodging a bullet.
Little exit strategy.
Exit strategy, yeah.
And then we just laugh.
Yeah.
Because we know exactly like where this is going.
That's awesome. So being married and running a business together sounds like it leaves like a minimal amount of time. Like, from my perspective, it seems as though there would be a minimal amount of time for like individuality, which is something that you brought up earlier, being able to keep your own identity. So how do you guys navigate that situation?
Yeah, so for a little bit of context, for those who are listening, we obviously run our business together. We live together. I mean, we're together literally 24/7, almost 365.
Yeah, we actually only have one car. We've had one car for over a year.
Well, the reason why is because when we moved out here, we didn't really know. I knew a couple people here, and we work from home, and I had a BMW, and I was making payments on a luxury car that was sitting in the garage that was just depreciating in value. And when we have a family, I wanted to get a mom car anyways. And I didn't drive my car for like 2 months, because he loves taking his truck, and he always wants to drive, or he always drives. And so I just felt like I was wasting money. So we sold it. And so now it's been a year since we've had a car, and we're really stuck never been in this situation though where we both needed the car, because
we're both together.
We live we live such a low-key life too. Yeah. But as far as maintaining individuality, honestly, I don't think that there is a ton. There is, because there is, but there isn't. I mean, our hobbies that we enjoy doing together, like riding dirt bikes and stuff, like we do that together. There are times where he goes and rides by himself, because I don't want to ride in 110-degree weather.
Yeah, well, and I think, so just going off that, so obviously like our lives are very interconnected and very intertwined, and we'll obviously spend a ton of time together, but we're also like at a place where if one of us is like, I honestly feel like I could use some time away from you, like I'm gonna go work at a coffee shop. Well, and like we're super just like, that's like, we're like, hell yeah, like go do you.
Yeah, and actually going off of what he said, there's been times before the quarantine where he would go to the gym or whatever, and I wouldn't go with, and I loved that time by myself because I felt like my creative juices were flowing, and as far as like creating content for our business and stuff, like I loved being by myself for a period of time. And I just felt like my creative juices were going, and it was really great. And we were gonna start doing that more, but then the pandemic happened and the quarantine, so we've literally been together inside.
That's great.
Once the pandemic is over, that's totally something that we want to do again.
But basically, I just feel like we're at a point where, like, even though we don't spend a lot of time away from each other, like, we're okay with, like, if someone's like, hey, like, I want to go do this, or like I want to do something by myself, we're like, hell yeah, like, go do that. And obviously, that's how our relationship is now since we're running our business together. But like before this, like when I was doing video production and she was doing like starting her personal training business, online coaching and all that, like we had a ton of individuality, and like we know that we've both of us have been like super supportive of one another. Like when I was doing video production, towards the last like 6 months of me doing that, I was gone a lot.
I'd only see him with his eyes closed when he was sleeping, and then I'd get up for work at like, he would get home when I was sleeping, and then I'd get up for work at like 6:30 in the morning, and he would be sleeping, and then he'd be gone all day. And there was actually a time where he was gone for like a month on the East Coast doing video production.
Which absolutely sucked, by the way.
Which is actually what then we decided for him to leave video, to work together and leave video production. But there was a ton of individuality there. And then ever since we met, since we were 19, we went to different schools, and we were always obviously had different jobs. And I worked a lot when we were for like 3 years in the middle of our relationship. I always had like 2 or 3 jobs, and I was also in school, and I was competing, so there was a lot.
So I think like we're just at that point where we know that if one of us wanted to maybe branch out in a different direction, like with our business or something, like we're going to feel supported. Like we're okay with, having that individuality and like supporting one another if like, we wanted to take a different direction with something.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It sounds like you guys had like a solid foundation from the get-go. Like when you met, you were doing totally different things and on different directions, but like on some level you guys synced perfectly.
Yeah.
And so like throughout the years you get closer and closer, and even though you have less time apart now, you already have that base level foundational understanding of like, if you want to go do something, you feel comfortable and safe enough to do it and express it, and no harm, no foul. And I think that's a really amazing place to get to. Like that's something to strive for other people who are in similar situations.
Right. And I feel like that really, really ties in with, people losing themselves in relationships, right? Like, especially in like the typical mother-father, like marriage relationship where like the father goes to work or the husband goes to work and the mom like stays at home and is like a stay-at-home mom, right? It's really easy for people to like get tuned into that and get caught up in that, where let's say like the wife, maybe has these ambitions, but her husband, wants her to stay home and like, do stuff with the kids, take care of the house, things like that. Right. So it's like people, like I said, lose themselves in their relationship, and there's just no individuality, and they just completely suppress like their needs, but then they convince themselves that they're actually doing the right thing. They convince themselves, oh, this is, how relationships are supposed to be. Like I'm supposed to, stay at home. I'm supposed to do this and things like that. So I think having that sense of like, am I losing myself in this relationship, or am I really connected with my truth? Am I truly connected with who I am and, my authentic self?
And if that's a stay-at-home mom's truth and she's, 100% loving it, and that's amazing.
Amen, yeah.
For sure. But if, what Nate was
if you
saying,
got ambitions.
if there's, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Well, you could be a stay-at-home mom and be ambitious about that. I don't want.
No, I didn't. Yeah.
No, I know. I don't want. Business. I just don't want that to get twisted in the message, because Nate's mom was a stay-at-home mom.
She rocked it.
And my mom was too. So there's definitely a massive amount of value there. But yeah, I just don't want to get that lost in the message.
True.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, my grandparents. My grandparents are very late in their years. My grandma just turned 92 and my grandpa just turned 96.
Oh my God.
My grandpa didn't retire until just like a few years ago. Wow. And my grandma was a stay-at-home mom, like raised 6 children, and like they were loving it. You know,
Yeah.
like they had a solid system worked out. They were both like fulfilled on their ends.
Right.
And that's like the stereotypical like American family upbringing. But nowadays it seems as though more people are embracing actually what they want to do rather than like what society says they should do. And I think that's super important. And I'm glad that more people are doing that and like understanding that they can do whatever they want and not have to like keep up this image of the man and the woman, the husband and the wife, the mom and the dad, and kind of do whatever they feel like doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Nate's mom is a really good testament to that in a sense because, well, obviously Nathan and his sister are long past high school, but his mom went back to, after raising them, she started nursing school when she was what, 50, in her 50s.
Wow,
and
that's awesome.
Became a nurse.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it's never too late.
Yeah.
Never too late. So I wanted to ask about boundaries, and you kind of touched on it earlier, but when you first, like you said, diving into like the self-growth and personal development, when you really started to learn more about boundaries and embrace them and learn the best ways to go about it, what did that look like for you two? Did you have any issues learning how to do that with each other, or was it just something that you kind of agreed on and understood and worked with each other on?
It was nothing that we actually talked about that I can recall, right?
And it's just kind of like a progression.
Yeah, and just as you learned, you know, about boundaries and in like personal development and stuff, it's just something that kind of we picked up, and yeah, we didn't talk about it. We just kind of like implemented it. And
well, and I think like a big part of it for both of us, I'm sure, is that like you kind of have to get to a point of like realizing that, okay, I have my experience, right? I'm living in my reality. This is the way that, you know, certain things making me feel. This is how I'm responding to it. And someone else is going to have a completely different experience. And so I think a big part of like boundaries is like acknowledging the other person's experience, even though it's different from yours. And I think a lot of people, like when there are no boundaries, it's really easy to like deny the other person's reality, which I know, you know, I've been guilty of. And when you're doing that, right, there's no boundaries, right? You're not willing to acknowledge and understand the other person's experience. You're just solely focused on your experience. And if they don't agree with you, it's just, you think like, oh, like how could they think that? Like, I know I'm right. Like how, like that just doesn't make any sense that they would feel that or they would experience that in this way. And so it's basically like denying the other person's experience. And when you're doing that, right, there can be no boundaries because you're not open to like trying to understand their experience, essentially.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, so I guess he kind of just totally summed up what I was trying to say in a sense when like we never really talked about them, but that's a really great point. We didn't talk about them because we're, you know, not denying the other person's reality, and we're like actively trying to resonate with the other person's experience, and just having that kind of like foundational understanding of like, this is my experience, this is your experience. It's not necessarily about being right or wrong, but it's about, can I step out of what I'm feeling to, you know, to better resonate and try to better understand your perspective on the situation.
Yeah, and so like what I'm gathering from this is that when you have that understanding of like you put yourself in the other person's shoes, you try to understand as best you can where they're coming from, and then it's just like this inherent understanding of like, I now understand what their boundaries are, and so I don't need to push on them or cross over these boundaries because I can understand where they're coming from.
Right.
And then it's and that seems to be like the ideal situation where you're not constantly having to tell the other person like, these are my boundaries, like, and constantly reminding them. But if you can understand where that person is coming from and like really internalize that, then that's just always in the background, and you can better navigate these situations without having any type of confrontation or frustration or issues when your boundaries potentially would be crossed.
For sure. I feel like that's probably the end goal in a relationship when it comes to the boundaries aspect.
Yeah. When the other thing too is that I also kind of feel like it's not even about, like, it's not necessary that you understand the other person's experience but it's more so important that you acknowledge that their experience is just different, or you understand it or not. Because most people, like I said, you're living in like your reality.
Let me pause you real quick. It froze for a second. Can you repeat that last part that you said?
Yes. So I think one of the important things is that it's not so much about understanding the other person's experience, but it's more so about just simply acknowledging that their experience is different than yours, regardless of whether or not you understand it. Because as humans, like we all have our own experience, and like we, in a sense, think that like our experience is right. Like we think, that, you're true. Like I'm right about this. This is, objectively true or whatever. And so kind of stepping outside of that and realizing, like looking at it from more of like a subjective perspective of like, our experiences are just different. It's not about, who's right or wrong. That's what I think is really, really the most important part, because that basically says like, hey, I acknowledge your experience, whether or not I understand it, but like I hear you, and I'm going to support your experience essentially.
That's a really good way to put it. And I think that also speaks to like these basic human needs of feeling seen and heard and accepted. It plays into that, and you can better support the person on the other end of that when you give them that level of understanding. Not understanding entirely their experience, but understanding that they have a different experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think
so
that's hugely important.
Yeah, I 100% agree. This is something that I'm like, with these needs of feeling seen and heard, like this is something I'm currently like, I thought that I had understood it, and then like stuff pops up in the background and I'm like, oh, okay, like I have more work to do.
Right.
Because there's just always more work to do. Like I had this understanding of like, okay, like I'm going to complete or like check off one box and then it's on to the next one. And I never have to revisit this previous box again. And like, that's not the way it works with this stuff. Like it's a constant game of trying to better understand and get to the next level. And you may have to take a step back and revisit and,
there's constantly like new levels that you're discovering, new layers of things that you're discovering, of things you already knew about, like boxes you already checked out. You're like, oh shit, like here's this new layer to this thing. I thought I was done with this.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty empowering to like go along that journey of like self-discovery and self-realization.
Yeah, I agree.
It's better.
Yeah. So that wraps up like the main points I wanted to talk about, but I do have one question, since you guys are now, you've been married for a little over a year, and
yes,
you have this house and things are going well with the business. Do you have any plans of like starting a family? What does that look like for you two?
Yeah, I don't know. What does it look like?
Yeah, so I am 10 weeks pregnant now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We
about to have a baby.
We're in like 7 months. We were planning earlier this year. We were talking about it, but then the pandemic hit and we were like, oh wow, okay, we should just hold off a little bit. And then month after month after month, and then here we are like 6 months into the pandemic. Well, now I'm 10 weeks, but backtrack 10 weeks. And we were like, you know what? They always say that there's never going to be a right time. And I really felt like being in a worldwide pandemic really probably wasn't the best time, especially
as it could be.
Hearing about a lot of people, their partners weren't allowed to go to ultrasounds, and people, are giving birth with masks on. And, we were just like, we're not going to totally put our life on pause when there's, no real end in sight to this. So we figured, let's just do it. Honestly, I think it was a great decision. And I think that, doing it in a pandemic really wasn't the worst thing. One of my really good friends, actually, her and her husband who normally work outside of the home, have been working from home throughout her entire pregnancy. She's about to give birth. I mean, what a blessing to be able to work from home and have your partner there to support you while you're pregnant. So I think there's been a lot of silver linings to the pandemic, but yeah.
Yeah. So first baby incoming. I can't
First
wait.
baby.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
First
I'm so
baby.
happy for you too.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah. That's going to add a whole new level of our relationship. Because I feel like, up until this point, it's like, how can we grow as people to like better serve each other, like in, a relationship setting in a marriage, and then like how can we not only become better parents as individuals, but also better parents as like a married couple. So that's kind of like a whole new layer that we're going to start unpeeling, with our first child. So that's going to be interesting.
We're really excited about it though. Like we can't wait to be parents. I think that there's, I feel like a lot of people have kids just to have kids, just being blunt and honest. And, they're not truly ready to parent. And that's something that we're really looking forward to, is truly parenting our children. And
also doing it like from a conscious perspective of like, just, like we talked about, like boundaries, like acknowledging the needs of your child. Cause I feel like, that's a whole other podcast, but it's really, you see like, a lot of parents are just like denying their kids' reality and denying their needs, which, comes with a whole host of potential issues later down the line in their relationships and their adulthood and things like that. So that's something that we're really excited for, to just like learn more as, how we can really like be amazing parents and like actually take an intentional approach of like reparenting ourselves so that we can show up better for our kids and really just give them, all the opportunities to just be absolutely brilliant.
That's amazing. I'm excited for this child's upbringing.
Yeah.
they're gonna have an incredible life.
So epic.
For
Cool.
sure.
Well, thank you guys so much for being on here. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to have this conversation with me, and I hope that the listeners of this podcast, I'm sure they will gain some value out of this. You guys had some incredible points.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was, I feel like, a really good discussion, because I feel like, relationships shape, so much of our everyday life, not just with like a romantic partner, but also with your family, your friends, your boss. So
literally everyone.
Yeah, like everyone, right? Unless if you, live like in the mountains by yourself, then you don't really have any relationships. But I feel like a lot of things we touched on is like so universal to like any relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is, with the program that I created, it's not geared in any way towards any specific type of relationship. It's more like broad spectrum, and everything we touched on this podcast was specific to you two in your relationship, but applies, as you said, universally to every relationship. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really glad that you guys have this level of understanding and felt compelled to come on here and share these ideals with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, once we have a baby, we'll have to come back on and see, just talk about how our relationship has changed, because it will change. Like our relationship will never be the same after we have a baby, and how our communication has been as far as, with having newborn, because there's going to need to be a lot of needs being met when I'm postpartum.
Yeah, I was just about to say, there's going to be a whole lot of new needs that are going to need to be met. So well, you'll have to check back in with us.
Yeah.
And see
absolutely. I would love to have you guys on again, and we can explore. As you said, it would be like just to even go over the basics would be an entirely new podcast. So
yeah, it's going to be a whole
another
can of worms, and especially, we've never done this before.
Yeah. So sharing our experience, like for new moms, and like, just, I don't know, how our relationship dynamic changes and evolves. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Cool.
Sweet.
Well, thank you guys so much, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Facebook is simply the comeback journey. I reply to each and every one of you who spreads the word and supports what this brand represents. Thank you, and I'll see you all next time.